right, let's be real. You have a massive exam coming up. It's just a couple days away, and the familiar wave of panic is starting to bubble up within you. You can already picture the long nights fueled by questionable energy drinks. You have mountains of books surrounding you, only to have your mind go completely blank when you see the test. We have all been there, friends, including myself. But what if I told you the entire stressful approach that you're doing is simply wrong? There are top performing students that are actually not studying harder than you. They're just studying smarter than you. They've learned how to use their brain a little differently. They optimize the power tools that they have within that are really within all of us. And it has nothing to do with cramming or pulling all-nighters. In fact, they don't do either one of those. So let's try a new way. In this video, I'm going to share the top 5 science-backed brain hacks that will completely change the way that you look at studying from here to the end of your time in school. These are not just little tips. These are shifts in your strategy that are going to help you learn faster, remember more, and walk more confidently into your finals, confident and prepared, all while studying less. Sounds beautiful, right? Well, hello folks, Dr. Kelsey here with KML Psychological. I've been a longtime psychologist and I teach these things to people all the time. I'm not kidding. These are science-backed and we're going to count down the top 5. So here we go. Here's number 5. This is called the Feynman technique. And really what this is something that any good studier does over the course of time. I remember when I was back in my doctorate program back in the day, a long time ago, I would sit there with my study pals and we would try to teach things to each other. Unknowingly, we were using this technique called the Feynman technique. A lot of times when we're studying, we have this kind of passive way of studying where we look over our notes time and time again. You put in the hours, maybe you listen to the lectures, and you think you know the material, but it's really an illusion of actually being competent or an illusion of knowing. You might have been passively taking in information, but not to the level that you need to know on an active level to be able to fully understand the information. So how do you bridge that gap there? What do we need to do? Well, the Feynman technique is, I kind of gave you a little bit of an idea of that before. It was named after a prize-winning physicist named Richard Feynman. And basically what we need to work on doing is taking very complex ideas and being able to boil them down into very easy to understand concepts. When we're able to do that, we know something on a quite a deep level. And I can tell you for sure that this is true. When I give a presentation for the first time, it feels clunky. Even if I know the information or I think I know the information, by the second or the third time I've given it, it's streamlined. It's really easy to understand. And that's when you know you've mastered something. So I want you to look at your studying like that. First, when you've done your studying, your first go around, then sit down and see if you can teach it to someone. Maybe you get up on the board and you actually draw it out, you discuss it. And then anytime you say something like, oh, I kind of know that, I know it, but I just can't put it into words, that's an indication to go ahead and circle that part of it and go back and reinforce your studying in that area. Get up again and then try to explain it yet again on that simplistic level, like say a 12-year-old level. Can you go ahead and do that? When you are able to describe those difficult concepts in a very easy to understand manner, you have used active recall. It's forced you to build stronger neural pathways. Every time you're teaching it, you're seeing where your stuck points are, where your gaps in your learning are. And also it's reinforcing the process of what is it that I know? What is it that I don't know? At the same time, your brain is saying, this is important. I'm going to hold on to this. I bet you haven't tried it out before, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. All right, counting backwards from number 4. This one here is all about spaced repetition, otherwise known as maybe chunking information. And it's all about the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. This principle here shows that if we do nothing with the information that we are learning or taking in about 24 hours, it's estimated that you can forget up to 70% of the things that you think that you have learned, right? So that helps you to kind of have a sense or understanding of why you go to class, you go to a lecture, you've been present, you think you're present, You might even think it's easy and you understand it when the professor is talking about it or the teacher's talking about it. You get home, you look at it a week later, and it's completely foreign to you. Why is that? Well, you probably haven't reinforced the concepts by going back and looking at the information again. You've let that time pass or lapse, and so about 70% plus of the information was gone within 24 hours, and it's going to continue to kind of degrade in that forgetting curve over time. What we want to do to shift that is move toward what we call a spaced repetition model. And we want to chunk information on top of that. Okay, so here, this is a scientifically proven kind of method, and you do not want to cram. We think that we understand information when we're cramming, but guys, I'm going to tell you straight up, a few things can happen. Not only are you trying to put too much information into your brain in a short period of time, so you're not going to retain it in the long term. But then there's also something else that can happen that's called interference. So information that you have prior learned, even if it's an hour or two before, can get kind of interfered with new information that you're learning. And so even if you remember details, you might mix them up with each other, and that's going to create an outcome that is going to maybe lead to some silly mistakes on your exam, and not a great outcome for you. Okay, so cramming is not a good method over time. Okay. What we want to do instead is spaced repetition that is scientifically proven. So how do we do this? And good teachers automatically teach you guys to do this stuff with your study skills. But a lot of times we just don't really listen to it. I remember I heard this when I was in high school and probably college too, but I don't know how often I actually did it. So basically you go to class, you learn the information, look at your notes within 24 hours. Even just simply reading over the notes that you have written down, looking at the context of the information, do a practice problem or two within 24 hours, even if you don't have an exam, a test, or a homework assignment due, that is going to reinforce your learning. It's going to stop that 70% to be lost within the first 24 hours, all right? It's a very critical piece of the process for you to do. And people that are naturally good, organized studiers do this type of stuff. They also time manage really well too. So then the second review is that we want to do this about 3 days later. So we want to look at things within 24 hours and then look at them again before the end of the week. The third review is about a week later, and the fourth review 2 to 3 weeks after that. So if you think about this over the course of, say, a semester of 15 weeks, you should be repeating that information that you learned on the first week at least 3, 4, or 5 times by the time you've gotten to the final, so that you haven't yet again opening up the textbook and it seems like it's the very first time that you've seen that. Okay, we want to reinforce that information and build it and layer it. Okay, the layering of the information. What I'm also going to say too, when we have good time management, we're not cramming 15 weeks of knowledge into one all-nighter, which doesn't work. When we do that, what we're able to do is what we call chunking at the same time, which is small amounts of information that we are going to learn and put together with each other. We're not taking all of the information and trying to cram it into our brain. We also can do association techniques when we allow ourselves to do that as well. All right. Moving backwards on to hack number 3. And this one here is actually one that I have recently started to hear clients of mine, students of mine over the time talk about. And it's the Pomodoro technique. And I'm really actually happy to hear that you guys are learning about this. I'm just going to reinforce it because it really does work. So this is all about our attention span. A lot of times, again, if we're sitting down and we're cramming, we have these outrageous ideas of how much time we're going to be able to sit and pay attention. And you might be sitting there for 12 hours, but trust me, your brain is not paying attention for that period of time. It's just you feeling better that you feel like you've done the work because you've sat there for the 12 hours. Don't do that. Instead, use what we know works. Our brains need breaks for multiple reasons. We need to be taking breaks and actually shutting things down before we gear them back up again. And this, again, is about managing in manageable chunks. So it's chunking of information as well. The idea here behind the Pomodoro technique is 25 minutes on, 25 minutes off. So we're sitting down and we're doing a task for 25 minutes. Literally set your timer. When that 25 minutes goes up, you are not doing anything like that anymore. Even if you feel like you can go beyond that, you shut off your timer, you take 5 minutes off. You give yourself a brain break. You get up, you move around, you do something fun and distracting, you use the restroom, you grab a snack, whatever it is. And when we are on that task, we are intensely working on that task. Our phones, these guys over here, go off to the side. We flip them over. We're not looking at that. We're not checking our email. But if we know we've got a break in 25 minutes, we know we can do it then. So it helps the brain and it helps keep us on track. It's very, very helpful and it really does work. Okay, so moving backwards, and before we do that, I am going to ask you if you wouldn't mind, if you would please hit that subscribe button so that I can reinforce and continue to do these things for you that are really science-based things that are going to help you either on study techniques, eating disorders, anxiety, depression. I do videos on all sorts of things from all my years of experience of work and science. Okay, moving backward on number 2. Hack number 2 is context or state-dependent learning. These are things that we learn in a basic Psych 101 class. I remember specifically teaching it in Psychology 101. But sometimes the things that we learn and we teach, we understand as concepts and we don't actually do them. I'm telling you, this stuff really does work. So context-dependent learning is kind of exactly what it sounds like. If I was to sit here and study in this office, in this spot, and only study in this spot, that might help me if I'm also taking my exam in this spot. And back when I was in nursing school, everything was, for my exams, was online. And so I actually did come and take my exams in this office because it was quiet on a Sunday. And so I would also do some of my studying in this office too. That context-dependent learning worked for me because this is the place that I'm studying in. And so my brain associates the material with this space. So that might work for you if you're doing online type of programs. However, it doesn't really work for you or for any of us if we are, say, studying only in here, but then we are going to take our exam at a testing center or in a classroom setting. That's a different place, a different state, right? So what that would do is if we only did our studying in here and then we've associated kind of all of our information here. And the idea here is that we're going to have a hard time bringing it over into our new state of maybe being in the classroom. So what can you do to get around that? Well, you can kind of mix up your study places and locations. Maybe you're studying in a quiet coffee shop. Maybe you're studying then the next day in the library on campus. Maybe you're finding an empty classroom on campus, which I used to do quite often before my exams when they were done on campus. There's a variety of things that you can do, but what I know is that many students these days, often may study in their bed. And this is a completely other side note. Not only is it going to be not great for you for state-dependent learning, because you're probably not going to be taking your exam in your bed, but it's also going to mess up your sleep because it's going to associate your bedroom, specifically your bed where you need to be sleeping, with being energized up and maybe anxious in the associated content of studying, okay? So it's not going to work in that way too. Mix up your study techniques and where you're actually studying, and never, ever, ever study or do work in your bed if you can avoid that. Even if you're outside of your bed and you have a chair like this next to it, it's different than actually being in your bed. And the number 1 hack of the brain hacks, this is going to sound like it's too easy, but trust me, as a psychologist, it is a big one. And this is sleep. Okay, if you had the opportunity to stay up all night before your exam and study and cram for 24 hours, pull an all-nighter, whatever you want to call it, I would tell you still to not do that. That is not going to help us for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it's going to stop us from being energized and alert when we are taking that exam. You are much better off taking a couple hours, a few hours, 7 to 9 ideally, the night before something big, and actually sleeping. Okay, that's going to allow your brain to be alert and aware. And even if you don't know the material by heart, it's going to allow you to choose the best option and to use what you do know. Something else, though, is important about sleep that we don't necessarily always know. And if you're if you've ever taken a Psych 101 class, college or high school, you do know this, but maybe again, you haven't actually used this information, which is that sleeping something happens in the brain. That concept of I'll sleep on it and then get back to you in the morning, that comes from somewhere. There's this idea that sleep does a lot of different things for us, but one of the things that it does is sleep consolidation, memory consolidation. It's a part of learning, and it kind of brings together all of the information that we do need to know, and it sort of pushes out the information, the details that we don't need to know. We consolidate things overnight during that sleeping process, which is why oftentimes after a really good night's sleep, we feel differently about a lot of things. Emotionally, we might feel differently about a situation from the night before. We might feel like we have answers to things that felt very difficult the night before. I'll tell you too, even as somebody who has been recently as an adult learning to play piano, I will sometimes do things at nighttime, I'm trying to get my fingers and my brain to connect together. My brain knows what it wants to do, but my fingers won't do it, right, on the piano. And then that same thing that felt impossible the night before might feel possible in the morning. So what's happened there? Maybe I'm creating new synapses and bridging in my brain, if you will, overnight. Things are consolidating. And so the same information or the same thing the night before can feel easier in the morning. Try it, guys. It's really definitely something that is science-based, and also really great to hear that we should not and do not need to be pulling all-nighters for anything. So that's my top 5: the Feynman technique, spaced repetition, Pomodoro technique, context-dependent learning, and a wonderful good night sleep before anything important in your life. Now you've got the tools. I'm really curious which of these hacks you're going to try first, or if you've tried them below. Let's share with each other, including other things that you know that have worked really well for you. If this video helped you out, please do make sure to subscribe, hit the notification so you don't miss the next one that I'm going to do. I generally do these at least a couple times a week, and I want to continue producing this for you. Now go ahead, guys, and ace those finals, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, remember, you matter, you deserve, and you're enough.